As drivers, we're faced with a massive amount of information that we must constantly deal with and process through. That's the reason road signs dot our landscape. They're constant reminders of things we're supposed to do and not supposed to do. In the previous segment, we talked about speed limits. Imagine how it would be if you were driving down the road and you went from the interstate to a rural highway to a town and then into a residential area, and there were no speed limit signs. Everyone would have to rely on common sense, which might not sound that bad. But are you really willing to bet your safety on other people's common sense? Traffic signs are reminders that to be safe, we all need to be on the same team in our driving, or at least on the same playing field. To all be on the same team, we need to know as much about the rules as we can, and that's where signs help. So with many different traffic signs on the road, it's easy to see why drivers sometimes get confused and lose track of the meaning of different traffic signs. And a lot of the traffic signs are similar in design, shape, or color, which may cause drivers to make mistakes when reading them. But there are a couple of serious side benefits to standardized traffic signage also, like they make communication more instant and they work across language barriers. Modern traffic signs have as much history behind them as civilization in general. During the time of the Roman Empire, roads that led to conquered nations were usually paved with stones and then had markers placed at regular intervals. This is where the term milestone comes from. As centuries went by, markers with town names and mileage became common. Then in Europe in the mid-1800s, the use of bicycles skyrocketed, and local authorities began using signs to warn cyclists of dangerous road conditions. It's estimated that near the end of the 19th century, there were as many as 4,000 road signs in England alone. Here in America, it's about the time horseless carriages came into being. Volunteer Auto Club began placing street signs in many areas to keep novice motorists from getting lost. And about the same time, some clever businessmen started erecting roadside advertising. In 1915, in Cleveland, Ohio, the first electric traffic signal was erected. And a year later, the first stop sign appeared in Detroit. And people have been running them ever since. But in about 1922, representatives from several different states came together and designed uniform standards for traffic signs and street markings. They created specific shapes for specific signs, many of which we still have today, like octagons for stop signs and round signs for railroad crossings. Their reasoning was that it would make it easier to recognize shapes rather than text at night. The first national standardization for traffic signs was finalized in 1935. And as drivers and roadway users evolve, so does our traffic environment. And no doubt traffic signs will keep up with that march in time. We've already seen the appearance of traffic control devices that have an audio component to them to aid visually impaired pedestrians, and electronic signs that automatically activate at certain times or under certain conditions. As drivers, we also now have signs that can be used to communicate specific messages to drivers in specific areas, such as the description of a vehicle used in a child abduction or a rapidly changing weather pattern. And through all of this, we now have National Traffic Sign Standard that kept up and consistently evolving in the form of the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So now let's find out what those different shapes, colors, and messages all mean.